We're joined now by Farhan Lalji. Farhan, it was the last media availability for players and management in Vancouver on Thursday. One topic still at the forefront was the underperformance of some of the top players in the playoffs. What was discussed about that lack of playoff success?
Well, Glenn, as you know, at this time of year, this is when all the injuries come out. And we'll start with Elias Pettersson, whose game really dropped off from the All-Star break going forward. And he admitted that he had a knee injury and said that as things progressed and the more he played with it, the worse he got. Now, he didn't say this, but my understanding was there was also a quad injury on that same leg, whether or not the two were connected. But Rick Talk had downplayed a little bit, saying that it was tendonitis, and they did talk as a group with medical staff about whether or not it made sense to shut him down at any point. But ultimately, they decided not to do that. So from Pettersson's perspective, it's been a difficult season. He admitted there's been a lot of noise around him, the contract, his poor play, and he's just looking forward to getting away and resetting, but it's not going to need any kind of surgery. As for Brock Boeser, who missed Game 7 with a blood clot, it was revealed that he was hitting the calf with a puck in Game 1, and then after that they monitored it. They did a scan after the 6th game and realized at that point that it probably didn't make sense for him to continue playing, so a lot of disappointment there. Quinn Hughes, interestingly enough, said there was no injury associated with him, so you have to believe that just first time through the playoffs, like an actual full playoff, really took its toll on him. And you see some other players in the playoffs, a guy like Evan Bouchard from Edmonton, who as he goes through this a few times was able to level up. It's going to take Quinn Hughes some time to learn how to do that and fight through those battles, but an injury not necessarily at play in his case.
Yeah, and the Canucks also just a few days removed from losing that big Game 7 against the Oilers. How much lingering disappointment did you sense among the club?
Well, a bit of both. Connor Garland was one who really lamented their lack of killer instinct in Game 6, saying that was the time to get it done. But, a lot of the players also took a 10,000-foot view and are really pleased with how far they've come, given the amount of losing this organization has dealt with. That said, Patrik Allvin was definitely regretful of where they were at. Just said repeatedly that this was only round 2 and that it was a lost opportunity and that you don't get these opportunities all the time. So I think they understood that when you get to a Game 7 and you're right there on the precipice of getting to the Final Four, you need to find a way to get that done, and this team didn't do it, and you just don't know what that's going to look like going forward.
Now, speaking of Allvin, he was just nominated for General Manager of the Year, but he's got his work ahead of him. 9 pending unrestricted free agents and 2 RFAs. Farhan, what was discussed with Allvin on his hopes for the offseason?
Well, I think one of the things he'd like to do was what he couldn't get done at the trade deadline, and that was add a top 6 forward. When Boeser and Pettersson were going, they were still short a top 6 forward, and when those guys were down or just not the same, it really exposed them that much further. So he wants to get some more scoring in that top 6 for sure. And then one of the things that both he and Rick Tocchet have emphasized is they want to make sure that they keep the size in their lineup. So when you look at the pending UFAs and RFAs, a guy like Nikita Zadorov, a guy like Tyler Myers, and another guy like Dakota Joshua, I think, are going to be front and center. I think a player like Elias Lindholm is going to be tough because, you can't pay him top 6 money to play in your middle 6 or potentially be a third-line center. So I think he really reestablished his value with how good he was for the Canucks in the playoffs. So I think they'll have those conversations. It'll be difficult. Philip Roenick, a pending RFA, I asked him about it, and he talked about the fit playing with Quinn Hughes, but said, well, it's not really up to me because I'm still restricted, but we know there's more to it and that restricted free agents do have a level of leverage that maybe both sides don't want to admit. So those 3 bigger players, I think, are going to be front and center in terms of Joshua, Myers, and Zadorov, trying to get those guys done and then go from there.
A busy summer coming up. He's our Canucks reporter, Farhan Lalji.